The Waterline Live. Join the climate conversation with Jonathan Levy.
Helen Todd, Humber Strategic Manager at the Environment Agency.
So you've just been taking part in one of the sessions on the Resilience Day. What was the focus of your particular session?
So for me, so my work is involved in developing a long-term strategy for how we manage tidal flood risk around the Humber. And two of the kind of fundamental parts of that is around recognising that the way that we traditionally manage flood risk is not going to be enough in the future as sea levels rise, and we need to be bold, we need to think differently, and critically we need to build resilience, and we need to be ready to adapt and flex to the future change as it comes.
I've been talking to both the World Meteorological Organization and the Met Office. In fact, one of the Met Office's marine scientists who's looked very much at what happens with sea level rise, and it is quite a challenge. First of all, in terms of how much will sea level rise, and there's quite a big range depending who you speak to, and also I guess the time scale of all of that, and then how that's compounded by extreme weather, tidal surges. So it must be quite difficult for you to try and work out exactly how much defence you put in and where.
That's an excellent point, and yes, it is very complicated, which is why we don't try to guess what's going to happen. So the way that we're approaching the future strategy is by developing something called an adaptation pathway. So what that essentially is ensuring that we have a clear plan for the way that we need to think about how we manage flood risk in the future, but not being overly prescriptive now about how we do that. So knowing that we will need defences in some places and we will need flood storage in some places, but not being overly prescriptive about exactly how high or exactly how much flood storage. But as things change over time, we will have mechanisms in place to help us understand the latest science and apply that at the time that's an appropriate timescale to start planning for more specific investments, specific pieces of work. If we try to plan now, you can guarantee we would get it wrong. So having that future vision, that future direction of travel, but waiting until we are in the right, we have the right amount of evidence to make the right choices is absolutely critical.
We've seen the defences going in around the sort of shorelines around the Humber, the project that's just happened or coming to a conclusion at Hessel near the Humber Bridge. There has been talk, though, of whether or not a barrier would be feasible across the Humber. Is this something that's still being examined?
It absolutely is. It is being considered as a very long-term solution. So, as I said, we need to be bold, we need to think differently about how we manage flood risk. And that includes thinking about things that at the current time might seem a bit futuristic. But it's really important that they're considered. So what we know so far is that if we considered a barrier of some sorts, it would be around 5 times the size of the Thames barrier. So this would be an absolutely huge investment. And we need to understand what other potential opportunities might come with that. And it's a sort of solution where working in partnership, as we do across the estuary with all the local authorities and other key organisations, if you collectively think about something as extreme as a barrier, but you're each finding multiple opportunities, that's the sort of thinking that might mean something like that happens. But yes, we're thinking outside the box. We need to think outside the box because of the amount of sea level rise we're expecting in the next 100 years.
As you say, thinking bold, like something like a barrier, and although the challenge, the engineering challenge, the cost would be huge, the cost potential of not doing it, the cities in the Humber being overwhelmed, would be an equally massive catastrophe in the relocation of population. So there are some big challenges literally and big thinking needed.
Absolutely, yes. And it's, as always, as with any investment, there is a balance and you have to weigh up the costs versus the benefits. And that's why, as I said, a long-term solution such as a bold thinking such as a barrier, and that's the beauty of the adaptation pathway, understanding if that is a potential future for the Humber, and then understanding at what points in the future as we kind of approach that sort of time frame that we actually need to start re-looking at the evidence and understanding more about the technical feasibility, the environmental feasibility, the financial feasibility, and so on.
Yeah. And when there is a risk of flooding, you issue warnings, so you also need preparedness, resilience by the population.
Absolutely, and I think that one of the key points I've been trying to get across today is around it's not down to the Environment Agency or the local authority to solve the problem. We cannot eliminate risk, and we will not eliminate risk. We make investments to help manage and reduce the risk of flooding, but everyone, whether that be an individual community, a business, a major industry, and also around infrastructure, everything needs to become more resilient, because the risk of flooding will increase, and the more resilient we are, the quicker we can all bounce back and minimise the social and economic impacts of any flooding that does happen.
I mean, for you, sounds like a challenging job, but what do you find stimulating about it? There must be stuff that makes you want to get up in the morning.
There absolutely is. The Humber, aside from the fact it's an utterly beautiful place, there is so much potential here. And I very much, that the flood risk is real, it's not new, it's always been here. But enabling us to manage it in such a way that provides the opportunity for the Humber to reach its potential, and the way that I've seen directly people's lives improved by local flood risk investment happen, it is, yes, it's very empowering. And it absolutely, I've been on the Humber for 25 years, and I may have another 20 or so left in me yet.
And how important is it to have opportunities such as the Waterline Summit to spread your message and then to engage with people?
It's absolutely critical. There are over 500,000 people at risk around the Humber at risk of flooding, and not everyone understands that. And if they do understand it, they don't necessarily understand what they need to be thinking about and what they need to be doing. So opportunities like today to come and talk to a diverse audience about the realities of risk, the realities of future change, but importantly how we need to think and what everyone needs to do about it is really, really important.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for talking to us on the Waterline Live.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Join the climate conversation with Jonathan Levy, a Blue Aurora media production for Marketing Humber.